Hello, my name is Kaya, and today we have Paul and Syann. They're both lifelong contactees of Zeta race. So thank you for being here, Paul and Syann.
Thank you very much.
Great. So today I'd like to do like a Q&A session, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yes. So the first question, very, very important question I need to ask is, who are Zetas?
Right. Well, many years ago, Betty and Barney Hill were taken by a race of beings, and Betty drew a star map, and they were able to, through the star map, identify what's known as the Zeta reticulum. The Zeta reticulum beings are prolific in their constellation. They are very active, working with humanity, as are other races as well.
So they are physical beings?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So how did you start contacting them?
They started contacting me because when I was about 18 months old, I was seeing them walking around the house. So I thought it was normal as a child. And then when I was about 5, I started going up onto craft. And then when I was 18, they bought a craft and they showed themselves to myself and my friends, very close, only maybe 8 meters away. When I was about 50, they bought a craft, and we had about 15 or 20 people with us, and they landed the craft and they came out and they walked around all of us as well. So
Wow.
We've had lots of physical interaction with them.
So if people started to say, so where's the proof? Like it's a lot of people wants to have evidence. Have you ever succeeded to take photos or videos?
Yeah. So we've recorded audio of the craft, and we've also recorded some photographic evidence as well. But the problem with AI and Photoshop and all these things is it doesn't matter what evidence you have, somebody will say that you manufactured it. So basically, the only evidence that we use is people. So when we are having an encounter, we make sure we've got people with us, and those people will write testimonial evidence that they have seen these beings as well.
Okay. I understand that point because my husband, he's very skeptic. And even we saw an UFO in the Sunshine Coast. Actually, he said to me afterwards, 5 minutes later, we saw that craft. He said that was airplane. So, So when people are ready, they can accept. I think that's what I think. Yeah.
It takes a long time. It takes a very long time.
Yeah. So there are so many different variety of gray beings that I'm aware. So can you explain about them?
Explain.
No, you can.
You sure?
Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's 63 different races of the Zetas, but one specific race is known as the abductors, and they do, contact and abduct human beings. The other 62 races do not do that. So what are some of the names of the Zeta races?
Well, we've given the other races names just so we can talk about them and know who we're talking about. But there's the technical race, the biological race, the scientists, the ethical, even the philosophical, and the silver race. Don't forget about them.
Silver race.
They define their races by their function, and so when we come across one of the races, we try our best to give them a name that accurately describes their function as best as we can understand it.
There are some people are taken to the craft, and some people has very good experience, and some people have like a scary experience on the other hand. So what's happening there?
Well, I mean, everybody has a different experience of what happens to them. I've not had any scary experiences on craft. Syann and I have been on craft together. We've not had scary experiences at all. I guess when a person's on a craft, it would depend on what they think is happening to them. Some humans went on craft are given screen memories. Those screen memories make a human believe certain things about what's happening to them on a craft. We don't generally get those screen memories as other people do, and because of that, we don't have any levels of fear in regards to contact with the Zetas.
So do you believe they are benevolent beings and then not so much benevolent beings? So sometimes things are, people talk about it in negative, but probably it wasn't. But do you believe that there are some beings and doing the wrong things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I think that humans need to understand that it's an infinite universe with an infinite amount of races. Is it possible that there are some out there that don't care about us? Absolutely, yes.
Yes. Some people are taken to the craft, and then one of the guy, he said, I don't want to go there anymore, but they keep coming back. So what do you think about that? Because he said, I'm using my free will to say, I don't want to go there anymore, but they keep coming back. And so where is the free will? What's happening to that?
You want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll do my best. I mean, like Paul said, there's multiple different races, and they've all got their own agendas. When we talk about the Zetas specifically, though, maybe we'll stick to that just because it'll be easier to try and go through all the different other ranges of possibilities out there. But it's a bit like we don't understand what's going on, really. When a child is taken to the doctors to have vaccination, for instance, they may be scared, they might not want to go, it might hurt them a little, but we all know that sometimes we have to have procedures done that are for our better, that are good for us, that we need to have, that for our health we need to do. And so I would suggest a lot of the contact experiences that people have with the Zetas fall under that bracket, that it's quite often they are trying to help, or they're checking up on us. A lot of humans may not realize that they are part extraterrestrial in their consciousness, they're hybrid human. And so quite often your race will visit you, and in visiting they will be making sure that the consciousness that you hold is embedded in wellness in your physical form, and so that your mind is operating as it should be, that your physical form is the best it can be. And these doctor's visits, if you like, are often misinterpreted by a lot of people because of the fear factor, like the lady you said who thought she was being cut by a knife but wasn't. She was probably having some sort of healing procedure performed by the sounds of it. So quite often the whole free will issue, issues regarding free will are misinterpreted. They're not understood. So people feel like their free will is being violated, but quite often it's not, because prior to being born, there was an arrangement with that race, with their spirit higher self, in which that the two came together to create the human in consciousness.
Yeah, so there's always an agreement between a spirit person and an extraterrestrial if the person's going to be a hybrid, and that agreement is done under free will before the person's actually born. Initially they speak to the parents and ask if they can work with the child. The parents' higher self have to give permission, and then once the spirit person's about to enter the procreation process, the extraterrestrials will speak to the spirit person and also gain permission from the spirit person as well, because the spirit person enlivens the physical form. Without a spirit, there is no physical body that will exist for very long.
So you mentioned that you're taken to the craft as well, you two, both of you. And was that physically or with the astral body?
It's been both.
Both.
So those experiences are different, right? Like when you're physical, you can sense and touch and everything.
That's right. So you can be walked onto a craft, you can be put through a wall onto a craft as well. Their technology's advanced, and they don't worry about the physical three-dimensional barriers that we perceive. Often most people now, when they're contacted, are contacted in their dream state via the astral, because it's less traumatic for a person to be contacted that way. But the problem is that the subconscious mind obfuscates the actual contact and puts a whole lot of abstract imagery around what's taking place. I prefer not to have that level of contact, because dream state contact is quite difficult to work out what's really going on. So when I first started working with them years ago, I said to them that I would prefer that we only had physical contact.
Do you remember how it looked like then?
Yeah.
Would it be possible to describe a little bit? Because we're so curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So on, like cars or all craft can be different. So when we saw, with a tic-tac, like a cigar-shaped craft, there are not many controls on the inside. It's quite sparse. The bigger craft, which could carry probably, 15 beings or more, when you walk in, there's like a skeletal structure that goes around the ridge of the skin of the craft. When you walk in, there's generally this dome in the middle of the floor that has recessed areas that you can lay back in and speak to the craft from. That's an amplification device. So if you lay back in it, you'll be connected to the craft's hive mind, the mind of the craft. If you're not in that and you need to do something physical, you can walk over to some of the organic control panels, because these craft are organic. And what happens is they have multidimensional geometric shapes. And if you touch one of the shapes, it will lift out of the skeletal structure. If you touch another one, it'll come out, and the two of them will then combine to form a function on the craft. Okay, so I don't know how to drive a craft or anything like that. I did try once, and it was pretty abysmal. I didn't go very well. And I think that they were doing it just to show me that it's not as easy as people think. We know that a lot of humans get screen memories that make them believe that they're actually being taught to learn how to fly a craft. But when we think about how complex these craft are, and that they would require a person's mind to be in complete stillness, we understand that probably the person's experiencing what's known as a Class B screen memory. Right.
Do the Zeta has families?
Yes.
So it's like operating like us?
No. So basically that they may have a partner, right? They'll have a partner, but they'll only ever have one child. Right. That's because once you reach a certain tipping point in regards to resource usage on a planet, you've got to be very careful about the amount of beings that you are allowed to create.
Do they still eat food or no? So it's just the prana absorbing? Or
No. What they do is they have all of their own vegetable matter, and they create a clear liquid out of it, and they can rub the liquid on their skin, which allows them to get all the nutrients that are required for them to exist in their container. They don't call it a body, they call it a container. They're able to step into the container and leave the container as well. Just as your body would be considered a container by them, you can step into your body and out of your body. But you have to wait for the incarnation process and then the transition process, whereas they don't have to do that. They can just step in and out as they require themselves to do that.
So how many years of the human time? Like how many years they live?
A container is good for about 1,500 years, but they're able to maturate or recreate a container from the same DNA. And then what they do is it takes about 3 months to maturate the container. Once the container is ready to be, inhabited, they move their consciousness from their previous form to their new container and continue on with all their memories. You don't need to be in a container though. So just as a person in spirit realm can exist with an oversoul, where many higher selves blend together to form one collective consciousness in spirit realm, the Zetas can also not exist in a physical form, and they can move into the collective consciousness and just exist there for as long as they want to, as a spirit person can in spirit realm. And when they're required to step back into a physical body, the body's in a stasis environment. They just bring the physical container out and then inhabit it. They don't need to be born like that. So it works quite well, actually. You'll probably find in the future that humans may do the same thing.
Yeah. But do they have like a purpose? Like, okay, everyone has a purpose, kind of. Like, why they exist? What's the mission?
The mission. So each individual person is trained according to their genetic structure. And just as someone may be, as a human, a great violinist or musician, that's because they may have a consciousness and genetic structure that is very lent towards understanding how to be a natural musician. They're the same. They all have genetic responsibility, and those could be a scientist, a doctor, a musician, or whatever, in regards to how they do that. From their perspective, though, like any race, they seek to look after themselves as well. So they're not just in service to everybody else, they are also in service to their own race, which means that if I'm a Zeta, I'm in service to Cyan. Cyan is in service to me. We are in service to you. So we are in service to each other. But in doing so, we're able to exist as a race because we are in service to each other.
Do they feel emotions?
They have some.
I think they've described their emotion range being, as we could understand it, as being degrees of curiosity.
Yeah.
So they can be curious about things, but I don't think they don't experience extremes of emotion like humans.
I'll give you an example, Kaya, of one. Now, let's say that Cyan is talking to one of the Zetas through me if I'm in trance, and Cyan asks a question that's been asked before, say, 2 years ago. They won't answer the question because, as far as they're concerned, when they gave the answer 2 years ago to somebody else, that Cyan should now know that answer as well.
Because that's how.
So that's because that's how they work.
Yeah.
We have to work out a protocol for contact. And that's what the races are actually doing. They're working out through the contact with all the individual humans, what is a protocol for contact, because humans are so different.
This is a bit different question, but what do you want to say to the people who are truly believing that one day in the near future, ET will come to this planet and attack us and invade us?
Okay, so there's a couple of reasons why that's not going to happen. Firstly, humanity is an introduced species to this planet, and these beings were around well before humans existed. That's the first thing. The second thing, if they actually chose to do anything to the human race, there is nothing that humans could do anyway. And so basically it's the opposite. The reason that people fear extraterrestrials coming here is because they understand themselves that they don't have the capacity to resist maybe at that level of warfare. Okay. These beings know this. They understand, and they treat humans in some way like a developing race. They know that humans have fear, and they're also aware that humans have concerns about contact as well. They'll only disclose themselves to humanity when humanity's ready, and they're not ready. Humans are not ready for disclosure.
Yeah, I think so too. It's getting better and better, more people talking about it, and then information on the internet, they're more, coming out. But still, like, we need to shake some more people and then, start to do the disclosure. So what are the star seeds, and could you please explain about the celestial beings as well?
Yeah, we'll start with star seeds. That's just a phrase or a different way of saying a hybrid human. So, part spirit consciousness, part extraterrestrial consciousness. We know from the Zetas that any hybrid human on this planet is one of consciousness. There's no genetic alterations, there's no DNA upgrades, none of that exists. It's pure consciousness, and that's because consciousness is quite capable of evolving and changing all by itself, and then that would filter through to the person. There's no requirement to alter the DNA structure of a human being. I think we do that enough on a daily basis anyway, just by consuming different foods and breathing different gases and things in the air. In terms of the celestials, that's a slightly different process, and I'll leave that one for you.
So with the celestials basically, when they're incarnating, they have two choices. They can either, from their interdimensional space, move down through the spirit realm, but bypass the oversoul. And using a matching frequency, they can find a spirit and they can heterodyne down while the spirit heterodynes up. They can blend and then have a hybrid experience in a three-dimensional form as a human. They can also bypass the spirit realm by projecting their consciousness to the physical form, which means that the human would generally be 95% spirit, but 5% overshadowed by the interdimensional. So there is an influence from the celestial in regards to the human form.
Are they existing in the different dimensions?
Yeah, absolutely.
How about Zeta? They are living in a different dimension, densities, or so third dimensional?
Yeah, so let's say that they exist in the three-dimensional space because they're in the Zeta reticulum, which is part of the Milky Way galaxy, about 40 light years away. So they're physical beings. That's how they're able to land craft, come out and walk around, right? But that doesn't mean that that's the end of your existence. Now, you're a three-dimensional being, but with a multi-dimensional consciousness, like myself and Syann and everybody else. But as long as we only reference, our frame of reference to ourselves is that we're in a three-dimensional space, that's all we'll ever understand ourselves to be in. And so when we understand that we can step out of that process, simply even by astral traveling into the fourth dimensional space, what takes place is we start to see ourselves in what we call a multi-phasic existence. And that multi-phasic existence is the consciousness of a person existing in different time frames and references to consciousness and interdimensional spaces. Humans really do have the ability to move into these spaces as well, even while they hold themselves in their three-dimensional space. So the Zetas themselves also have more control over that, but still use the three-dimensional form to build a craft. If they're going to build a craft, they use a three-dimensional craft. Yes, the craft can dematerialize and travel faster than the speed of light, but of course that technology is, probably around somewhere that humans know about, and possibly in the near future, that information may also be used by the human race as well, especially with artificial intelligence.
So they come through, from where they not live, but where they are to be here. Do they use the portal?
So are you saying if they're on planet 40 light years, Yes, they do use portals. So about 3 days journey from where they are, there is a portal, a black hole actually. And then there's another portal that's an entry point here. And so they're able to just skip through. It takes about 6-7 days to get from where they are to here.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard that there is a big portal in Sedona, and then some places, on the planet. And then where are they?
Everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah.
There are portals everywhere. There's multiple ways to open portals and close portals. That's the first. People can do it. Sometimes there's natural portals. Other times the portals are opened by other beings. Other times it's a technology. Like you make a phone call, it opens a connection process to a tower. That's also on some level a portal. So there's portals everywhere through all levels of technology and consciousness.
So if someone wants to contact Zeta or wants to communicate with them, is there any method or, how they can do it?
Well, the thing is you don't want to contact the Zetas if you're not from that race. What you want to try to do is contact your own race, and that can be done through point of origin training. So point of origin training is based around learning about harmonics and breath work, compression, states of existence in electrons. And in doing so, you can work towards developing your own conscious nature to access your own race. Trying to access the Zetas when you're from a different race, say a Palladian, it probably isn't going to work too well because you're in a three-dimensional form. You've got a lot of biases as well, and you may not have moved into a state of stillness. Trying to move to a hive mind mentality where it's based in stillness, you won't even be allowed to enter.
So there are a lot of people channeling different beings, right, on this planet. So they are most likely communicating with their races without knowing, maybe.
Well, this is the thing, you see, they could be, but what if they're not? What if they're communicating with the spirit and the spirit's telling them that the spirit isn't extraterrestrial, interdimensional? We see this all the time. I would suggest that people need to learn to evidence their channeling. When a being says or comes through and starts making statements, the first questions for the being should be, how can you evidence yourself to us so that we know that you are who you are? Because if you don't do that, a person will just end up with a spirit pretending to be an interdimensional spirit, entity.
Sometimes hard to distinguish. So, which is real or what they are.
But that's why the responsibility is with the being, not you. So if someone's channeling and there's a voice coming through them, then they obviously can talk. So you say, well, okay, how are you going to evidence yourselves? What are the ways that you'll do that? Next thing the being may say, okay, well, I'm going to heal that person. And you go, okay, well, let's see you do that. And they say, next thing that person gets healed, they, got evidence that they were unwell. They have evidence that they're better. That's not the only evidence. There should be multiple levels of evidence as well. Should be, okay, if you work with me and you are with me all the time, you should be able to read the timeline. What's going to happen to me next Wednesday? Now, if it's your own subconscious mind, you're not going to get it right. Or I'm going to bring a craft in 14 days. I'm going to land it on your lawn, right? You go, okay, well, if it doesn't happen, I'll know that I made it up. And if they do land, then I know that I didn't make it up. That way I then end up with a level of trust. We learnt to trust what they said because when they said they would do something, they did it. It wasn't up to me to work out how they would evidence themselves to me. They had to tell me how they were going to evidence themselves.
You just mentioned about the book.
There's about 8 books. There's 8.
Okay.
And so the very first one I wrote was called Alien Interaction. And then I came across a scientist called William Trinneet, and he brought together a lot of the information from some of the sittings that we do when the Zetas come and speak through me. And that developed into a book called A Primer of the Zeta Race. Then the next book that was put out was called The Zeta Interviews, and that's 700 pages of transcripts of the Zetas talking to hundreds of different people in public settings that I've done. Then I put out a book called The Zeta Mind Contact. That's a book that's a handbook to try to teach people how to contact extraterrestrials. And then one of the last books I put out was The Hive Mind, which is my story about my development, how I went from being a child through to where I am now.
Is that hard copy or it's on that Amazon? Or?
Get them all on hard copy, or you can download a primer of the Zeta race and the Zeta interviews for free from our website, thezetaconnection.com.
The video is coming to the end, but this is the last question. So what are the most important messages from Zeta to the humanity?
They always want to make humans aware that they are more than just what they think they are, that we're a lot more than our 3D physical reality would make us believe, that we operate in processes of consciousness already quite naturally, and that we don't need any other being, any implants, any technology to increase those abilities, that we're more than capable of increasing those abilities naturally.
Just be aware that they've been warning for many years about technology and AI, and just saying, just be aware that, you know, you just need to take things slowly. They're not saying, you know, don't, you know, to ignore them. They're just saying, just take that path very slowly, because it can be a very powerful process.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate of your time and the beings, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again somewhere, sometimes soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.